Hey everyone, I'm Mason. I'm a DJ and producer from Amsterdam, where I live with my kids and cats. I'm Dutch, Greek, and indeed I'm very cross-eyed. And yeah, the lovely people of Beatport asked me to give you guys a bit of a view how I work. So I'll show you around my studio, I'll show you the gear, I'll show you what my workflow is, and I'll give you a few tips and tricks. But if there's anything, just comment here below, and I'll try to answer every of your questions. So yeah, I've been playing and DJing for more than 20 years now. I'm releasing music on Island Records, Defected, Lulu Records, Bunny Tiger, but also my own Animal Language label. My latest release, Stop Start Slow Fast, is out now, featuring the man on Island Records, and I'll show you a bit of the project later on. But enough talking, let's get going and get geeking.
Let me give you a quick walkthrough of my studio. A couch for inspiration. My vinyl, I think the first 10 years of my DJ life I've been playing vinyl only, so I can tell you my back is really happy that digital music came around. Here's an old Revox tape deck. I use it to master a little bit or play around with that. And then you get into my booth, where I spend, most of my days at the minute. The core of my studio is an old Mac Pro with Logic Pro. I have a few UAD satellites for extra CPU because the Mac is quite old. I've been using Logic Pro since end of the 90s. I think it was still black and white and was MIDI only. And we were all amazed that later on audio came where you could actually record and play back audio, and it was just flabbergasting. And then automation came, and we've come a long way since. I don't think the different DAWs are particularly better or worse than the others. They're all pretty great these days. I think the main thing is to stick to one and become super fast at it. Because the faster you can work and the less you have to worry about all the technical stuff, the more time you have to be creative. And that's the fun part and the most important part, I think. So let me walk you through the gear a little bit. For audio interface, I'm using Metric Halo 2882. I have two of them, so that's 16 in, 16 out. But I do have an extra spare ADAT, so I can use 24 in, 24 out if I want. I'm mixing everything on a Neve Mixer. It's a summing mixer, the Satellite 5059. I'll tell you a little bit about my workflow with this later on. Over here you have a stereo pair of tube EQs. MIDI interface, Vermona, drum machine, some extra gear, controller, monitor controller, iPad for a secondary screen. I use it mainly as an analyzer. Here you get my compressors, the distressors with British mode, stereo pair. I use it for drums a lot. Here's the API 2500, the famous one. I'm using it mainly as a bus compressor. The SSL G-Bus clone, a Drummer compressor, here's a Focusrite channel strip, and above, this is my main bus compressor. It's the Manley Variable Mu tube compressor or limiter, and I use it a lot these days. Over here on the right, here's my signal flow for my microphones. As a preamp, I'm using Heritage Audio HA73. It's just been released, and this whole Elite series is really great by Heritage Audio, so go check that out. And afterwards it goes through this Warm Audio WA76 compressor. So all my microphones go through this, but also I can route a little synth through it or something. The studio used to be filled with modern synths, but I'm going a little bit the other way around, that I want to be able to work very quick and go from project to project. So my setup is much more simple these days. I have a few little synths left. Nord Lead I'm using mainly as a MIDI keyboard. The JX3P by Roland, and a Moog synth. And over here you have my little DJ booth. I can't say that I practice DJing much after 22 years still, but for instance this Pioneer SP16, I'm bringing along to all my DJ shows, so I have it here to just check timing of things and load in samples, so I can do a little preparation for that stuff, so I can. And over here is my little vocal booth. I have a bunch of microphones, the main one being the famous Neumann U87.
I've been changing around my workflow quite a bit the last few months. In the far past, I used to do mixdowns on these old big mixing consoles. That's where I'm coming from. Then for the last 10 years, I did my mixdowns in Logic. And I had a few issues I wanted to solve. First of all, sound. I miss the sound of an old mixing console, the way it sums all the different channels. It gives, for me at least, my personal taste, a certain depth and a certain warmth that I was missing in the summing, the mixdown of Logic.
So that's one problem I want to solve. The other issue was I have a lot of analog compressors and EQs, as you can see. And in the past, I used to just route them one-on-one out of Logic. So on a certain channel, you put an I/O plugin. It says go to this output. It goes through the audio interface to compressor and gets converted back in and goes back into your Logic channel. There's a lot of delay there, and then Logic compensates that delay, the latency. But it's, in my opinion, not always super tight. So, for instance, when you reopen a plugin, reopen a project, and sometimes it's changed a little bit, and well, it was giving me all sorts of timing issues. And in house music, timing and tightness is just so important. So I wanted to get all those analog gear also in the audio domain, because if it's just an analog audio, you can just go back and forth into a compressor and the timing is tight. So I guess the most obvious solution would be to just go back to a big mixing board. But I didn't want to do that because I'm working on a lot of different projects. And I want to be able to switch back and forth a project 4 times a day without every time I have to set up the whole mixing desk in its original position and put every knob in the right position before I could work again. That takes just a lot of time, and I didn't want a digital mixer because I wanted the analog sound. So I found a middle ground. The solution for me is this Neve 5059 summing mixer. The way I work now is I do all the mixing in Logic, so all the 50 or 100 channels or however I'm using, all the volumes and all that is all done in Logic, and then it goes through 16 outputs, 16 buses. It goes into the Neve Mixer, and on the Neve Mixer I keep all the volumes on 0. So if I switch back to a different project, all the volumes are still fine. And what the Neve does is, first of all, the summing. So all these 16 channels are summed, so they get a lot of depth, a lot of warmth. It also has some extra options about sound that you can adjust, which is really nice. And also all my analog output gear is now routed through the Neve Mixer. So in the Neve Mixer I can say, okay, for instance, this drum sound, I'm putting it to channel 15 and 16. And over there I'll put an insert that it goes to my distressors, for instance. And then it goes analog out and into the Neve, and it will still be super tight. And then when all the 16 channels are summed, it goes as a stereo channel back into Logic, where I just bounce it in one click. And I have a digital audio file. So for me, this is a real solution to my problem, and it really put my sound to the next level, I think.
Hey guys, so this is a normal project of mine. This one is Stop, Start, Slow, Fast, my current single with the Manor on Island Records. It's out now also with a lot of remixes by Zombie Disco Squad and a bunch of others, Parks, and well, check that stuff out. So I'll walk you through a little bit how I work in a Logic project. For me, it's very important to be able to work super fast. So if you have an idea, you can just quickly put it down and make another one, and make another one, and make another one, and make another one. And you don't want to be busy with all the boring stuff. You can tweak all that stuff later. So I think it's very important to have a super strong template. So you can put all the stuff down very quickly. For instance, all the sounds I've made over the years in different tracks that I liked, I always save as channel strips. So those are not, like made by a plugin developer or anybody else, but are my own sounds. So it's my own tweaked audio instrument with my own whole range of plugins. And I saved them all. So you know, here you can go through them. You can see here's the bass sound from Exceeder, let's say, and it makes it very easy to very quickly put an idea down. And afterwards, when you've chosen which track to finish, then you can tweak all these stuff indefinite and change all this stuff. But to very quickly be able to work, I think that's very handy. And I do the same for drums. So I make samplers. So my whole keyboard of 128 notes are filled with my favorite claps, for instance, in this one. But I have the same for snares and for kicks and for hats and for crashes and for toms, etc. So I'm very quickly I can sort of put my ideas down, and I have my favorite 128 hi-hats or 128 kicks. And I change them from time to time, update them. So if I have new sounds I find better, you know, I add a few, delete a few, resave them. But it makes it very easy to work, so I can easily, you know, transpose notes and find a better snare. Yeah, I'm never really satisfied with just one sort of sample bundle from any of the developers, you know. It's always like I like a snare here, and I like a snare from that, and I like a snare from that. So I compile my own stuff. Also, to be able to work fast, it's important to have your routing already saved in your template preset. For instance, I have 8 sends on every channel usually, and they always go to the same places. So I know that always if I turn up send 1, it will go to a long reverb, and if I put up send 2, it's to a plate reverb. Send 3 is to like a super long 15-second reverb with a side channel, and so if you get like a click in it, you'll get like cha cha cha. And well, bus 4 is a stereo delay, bus 5 is a tape delay, etc. Just to again be able to work very fast, and afterwards you can tweak all these things. You can then, when you know, okay, now I'm going to actually finish this track, you can change the long reverb into a better long reverb. Same for the routing. For me, everything usually comes together on one audio channel on the bottom of my screen, and that's where everything is in. So then I can automate stuff for the total. For instance, here in this breakdown, there's a little volume curve. So just before the beat kicks in, the volume goes up again, so you get an extra push. And I usually do the same with, for instance, low cut. So just in the breakdown or on other points in the track, I sort of take out a little bit of the low, so it goes up to maybe 100, 150 hertz. And then when the beat kicks in again, it's back from 0 with all the frequencies. Then it comes to my, after it being out to the Neve Mixer, it comes back into my master channel strip. With this track, but more often I use a little bit of saturation from FabFilter. I think they make awesome plugins. Also, this plugin I use a lot from Brainworks. It's very simple. What it does, you can tweak the stereo imaging. So, for instance, with this one I've put down everything below 227 hertz is now in mono. And you can wonder why, but the thing is, I'm making music for clubs, and in clubs, usually the speakers are everywhere. They're not like on a live venue where they're just one rig on the left and one rig on the right. They're everywhere. So a lot of times clubs are switched to mono. So everywhere in the club, it sounds kind of good. But then you need to make sure that your kick and your bass, because that's kind of a fundamental part in house music, is sounding fat everywhere. So I'm putting everything on mono, everything below in the lowest, let's say 200 hertz, or sometimes 150 hertz, depends. And so everything above that you will hear in stereo, but just below, make sure that stuff is just always mono. And the stereo imaging for me can be a bit like a tree. So everything on the bottom is very straight in the middle, and then the further you go up, all the high stuff, it can be super stereo. Also, you see here, I've put up the stereo width a little bit, so it even makes it a bit more wide. Then there's a little compressor. I'm using my multimeter LUT. It's important, people, to make sure, for instance, to check your phase issues and make sure your phase is always close to the +1. And then what's also a very useful plugin for me is this Sample Magic AB plugin. It's super simple. You load in 9 tracks that you think are sounding fat, and you compare it with what you're doing at the minute. And why? It's because if you would sort of stop your DAW and then go to your Finder, open an MP3 you like, by the time you're like 10 seconds further, and your ear memory is only like 2 seconds. So you need to be able to hear very fast the difference between the 2 tracks. And here you can just click A/B back and forth between 2 tracks, and then you straight away hear like what is different. So you can hear my track lacks a little bit of 1000 hertz, or those kind of things, or it's a bit less stereo, and it really helps me to identify mistakes, let's say. Ready when you are, let's go. It's stop, so far. Ready when you are, let's go. I can give you a bit of an idea how I made this bass sound. It's recorded from an analog synth, but then compressed it with the Chris Lord HB waves. What I use a lot is this SPL plugin, the Transient Designer, or the SPL Attacker. And what it does, it just adds a little bit extra attack on the track, whatever it's in there. So even if it's not like a plugin or it's an audio instrument where you can actually adjust the attack, you can then still adjust the attacks of vocal, for instance, or of any material by using this plugin. And it gives it extra a little bit of a clicky, and sort of it cuts through the mix a little bit better. This UAD plugin, Cooper Time Cube, what it does sort of similar things like a sample delay would do, for instance. So it gives it puts a little bit, 60 milliseconds of delay on the left and 40 milliseconds of delay on the right. And by this, it sort of fools your brain to think it's very stereo, because the right comes now a little bit quicker to your ear than the left, while it's actually just still very sort of in the middle. So it's a really great way of faking stereo width, while still, if you would play it on mono, it would sound great. A lot of plugins, if you change the stereo width, they programmed it the way that on mono, it would sort of start to disappear or sound. You get phase issues, or it sounds weird. And this the UAD guys made with this one, they sort of had a workaround, and it just sounds great also on mono, and that makes it very handy for me. Then there's this EQ I've put on it. Well, it's a famous clone from the Puke Tech. And there's a sidechain compressor. I think most of you guys know how sidechain compressing works. I usually always have a guide channel on top of my screen that goes to bus 7, and then all the other channels are listening to bus 7 if I want them to sidechain on the kick. But don't forget that it's also sometimes handy to sidechain on something else. Sometimes you want, for instance, a synth sound or a pad sound to sidechain on the vocal, so that the vocal always cuts through. So when there's a vocal word, the pad goes down, if it's, for instance, the same frequency range. The good thing if you put it on a channel like this is also that you can do volume automation. For instance, here the sidechain goes down, which means all the sort of pumping sound would calm down a little bit, and things would sort of become a little bit more even. And then when the kick drops in, you're back at with sort of pumping sidechainy, housey sound like this.
Ready when you are, it's always start, slow, fast. Ready when you are, let's go. It's start, slow, fast. Ready when you are, let's go.
I work a bit different than most people, I think. I notice a lot of producers are just sort of starting on a track and then working until it's finished. But I'm a true believer that the core of a good track is a good theme or a good hook or a good groove. So, and that's just the writing process. And I think the production to make something sound fat is a different process. And that's these days easier than before. But it takes a few days. So I much rather wait until I have the right record and right idea before I go into that sort of finishing process. So I write a lot. I have these demo sketch weeks where I do, maybe an idea an hour, let's say, and they can be like 15 seconds or 30 seconds loops. And then on the end of the week I have 40 ideas, and then after 2 weeks I have maybe 100 ideas, and then I finish the strongest one, and 99 are just going to end up on the shelf. I was just checking, and there are like 7,000 ideas in there or something, and I only release like less than 1%. And I mean, majority is also rubbish, obviously, but I think it's important to keep on training to write. It's just like a muscle, and it's you just need to train it. So out of the blue to come with a good idea, it's never going to work. You just need to write and come with lots of ideas, record a lot, and then once in a while you get lucky to have the right idea. So that's how I work. And also I get inspiration from a lot of old stuff as well. I think a lot of people are very preoccupied with what's happening now, what's cool and what's trendy, and I try not to be too preoccupied with that and just follow my own course. And hopefully, and I think my fans appreciate that. So trends are boring, and there's so much good music also behind us. If you dive in stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, there's so much great music out there that doesn't get played on radio or might not have surfaced. So my tip for you is also to look back and dig deep. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoy. If there's anything, just comment below and I'll try to reply. You can find me also online on Facebook /Music of Mason, anything really /Music of Mason. And I wish you guys all the best and good luck with your own music. Ciao.